All right, welcome back. College Prep Roadmap Series, Week 11. I hope everyone is doing well and everyone is staying safe. College Prep Roadmap is here for you parents and students to bridge the gap from the high school and also provide you up-to-date information, tips, strategies, and resources that will help you navigate the high school experience, the college prep, and the application process. So today's topic, it is a big one. Patrick, like I told you earlier, essay writing. I have to tell you that there are two areas in the college application process that most students are worried, concerned, afraid about. And one of them is essay writing. The other is test prep. Essay writing is crippling. It can be very daunting. So today's episode is talking to Patrick. Patrick Brown is from Prompt. Prompt is an essay writing service, a service and company based out of New York. And the great thing about essay writing coaches is they're going to read and share information with an unbiased approach. We always lean on our English teachers. Those are always a great resource on campus. You can't have enough support from your classroom teacher, but that extra writing coach helps build confidence. And especially nowadays, or especially today, when the test optional and no more tests will be required for this upcoming year. So we are going to be leaning on the essays and leaning on applications and volunteer experience. So Patrick, thank you so much. So appreciate your experience and your insight in essay writing tips and strategies. Before we begin, I would love for you to share with the viewers how Prompt got started. I love a good story, and I love this story. And then I'm going to ask you a few questions that I hear most often from my parents. So if you can start with that.
Yeah, for sure. Hi, everyone. So Prompt was founded in 2014 by 3 MIT grads, and the mission then is still the same mission now, and it's to improve student writing skills, to make people better writers. And so when the 3 co-founders started down that path, they realized really quickly that college admissions essays was an interesting place to start with because students tended to be really invested in that type of writing, obviously, and open to feedback. And so being open to feedback and creating a feedback process around writing is how students really start to improve their writing skills. So we think of ourselves, currently, we're the #1 provider of writing, coaching, and feedback. So it's, we don't do any writing for any students. We are educators who provide instructional feedback on writing that students are going to do. And we specifically focus on the big things: content, structure, clarity, right? There's a lot of times students get feedback on sentence level stuff, which can be helpful, but it's really important to focus on the big stuff around quality of thought, structuring that thought, and really providing it in a clear way. So that was the founding story. Fast forward to about 2016, actually 2017, I came on board as the first non-co-founder employee, our VP of operations. Over the last 3 years, we've grown really quickly. We've provided feedback on over 45,000 college admissions essays. We now have a full-time team of 20 people, and we have a team of writing coaches spread around the country of over 150 writing coaches. And it's quite difficult to become a writing coach with us. That's not to say like, hey, look at us, so hard to work for us, but it's because it takes a certain type of person to be able to provide high quality instructional feedback that's encouraging to help students build that confidence in the essays that they're writing.
I love that. I love stories that have to do with students because they get it. It's authentic. They are a student, they've gone through the process, and while they're a student, they're evaluating or trying to sort out what's the best way that I can help others, or that we can help others. So I love that. I really appreciate you letting us know like how Prompt got started. Another great thing that you brought up that I want to highlight is you review essays. You provide feedback, but you don't write the essay. Can I just tell you? Okay, so 28 years as a high school counselor and 7 years as an independent college counselor. The biggest question that I have from parents and students is, how do I write the best essay? And is there a service that can help me write it or write it? And they don't mean it in a bad way. They don't, well, it sounds bad, but it doesn't, I mean, it's not like they just don't even know where to begin. It's very daunting, as I mentioned earlier. And when you read an essay, you wonder if it's a solid essay, how many times has this been edited? And has a professional or an outside adult, did they write this? So, and that's I know that you probably have come across that. Can you talk a little bit about when a college reads an essay, the radar that goes up when they know this has not been written by the student and they may have had too much help, that fine line? Could you please address that?
Yeah, for sure. So a college admissions reader knows immediately whether or not a student has written an essay. What we think about our role in the writing process, we think of ourselves as writing coaches, and we don't even use the word editor because we think it doesn't accurately capture what we do. We're trying to help a student tell their most compelling story in their own voice. And that second part is really important, right? In their own voice. Because if you think about what a college is trying to understand from a student, they want to understand who you are, how you think, who are you potentially going to become, right? And so that has to be authentic. And you have to write an essay from inside out and not outside in, right? And so I understand why parents and students ask these questions. It's the same. I always give the advice, like, don't go Google examples of college essays. Because what happens is you'll start to land on essays that have been highlighted in like New York Times or the Washington Post or whatever, and you start to think, well, my essay has to look like that or it has to sound like that. It's not the right way to think about it, right? It's about who you are and trying to communicate your authentic story more than anything else. So it's really important that obviously you write it, and if you're going to work with someone to get some feedback, which we think is vital, it's a really important part of the process, get someone with an objective point of view that can help you think through your content, your structure, and your clarity, right? The other thing we talk about is in all of the essays we've ever seen, the number one issue with essays doesn't actually tend to be writing. It tends to be the content that students are focusing on, right? Because an essay doesn't have to be perfect. There's really no such thing as a perfect essay. It has to articulate your story. And that's what we really feel passionately about helping students do.
And it's so important. I mean, like I said, that support is so beneficial because I do know, I mean, firsthand experience on the front line working with high school students is they start to feel insecure. If they were a decent writer, they're no longer confident. Everything just starts to drop a couple notches. And you said that, they'll go and look at some essays that were written a couple years ago that were on the, the LA Times or wherever it was, Wall Street Journal, and they read it and they go, oh my gosh, there's no way I can come close. But again, it's got to come from within. And I love that. I like that. I'm going to write that down. I'm going to use that when I talk to students. It's like, that's so important. Now, I'm a student and I am just, I have writer's block. It's a prompt, and the prompt is pretty open-ended, so it's not a specific writing prompt, and I don't know where to begin. Could you share with us maybe two or three tips on what a student can go through, maybe a few exercises or anything that you can share with us? That would be great.
Yeah, for sure. So one of the things I always say about this is to de-emphasize topic early on. And the reason for that is a topic is essentially a vehicle for communicating your story, right? I've seen great essays where the topic is about a student and their daily walk to school, or I've seen a decent essay about like a paperclip. Like the topic is just a vehicle. And so what happens with a lot of students is they think that this has to be the most dramatic thing that's ever happened to them that they need to write about. It doesn't, right? That's actually not true at all. And oftentimes it's actually not a great thing to write about. So when you think about getting started, it's important to allow yourself to do reflection on who you are. We like to talk about 5 traits that we know colleges really like to see from applicants. So the 5 traits, and we can share this as well, is initiative, drive, intellectual curiosity, positive contribution, and diversity of experience, right? And so you want to think through those 5 traits and see if any of those resonate with you. And it's not just like, yeah, I'm driven, or yeah, I take initiative, right? Because in an essay, you're not going to say that. You're going to show that. And so what's important is to give yourself the opportunity to think about any experiences that you've had over the last like 2 to 3 years that would, highlight one or more of those traits. And you don't need to highlight all of them, right? You want to sort of pick one or two that are most meaningful to you. But I would allow yourself the opportunity to go through all 5 traits, just because you may think, well, I'm super driven. And then all of a sudden you start writing out experiences around each of these things, and you realize that like actually intellectual curiosity is something you spend a lot of time doing, right? You research about a particular subject that you love far more than any class assignment or any of your peers. And so you're starting to look for these unique things that you do in your life and making those connections that will actually help you start the brainstorming process. We actually built a set of tools to help students do this. It's a structured set of modules that students can go through that allows them to reflect on who they are, what they care about, and then start to brainstorm using really guided questions to brainstorm specific experiences that can highlight some of these traits. The other thing I would say is don't stress, right? There is no right answer here, right? There is no right answer to an essay. And so it's okay. I don't know what the type of writer you are. You may like to just sit down and sort of do stream of consciousness and free write a bunch of things that have happened. You might be a little more structured. Anything is okay, because you're likely going to go through a few drafts of this. And so start to write down doesn't need to be perfect. You just need to start articulating some things, because it's probably pretty unlikely you've done a lot of this type of writing before. You might have done a personal narrative in one of your classes, but oftentimes this is the most vulnerable writing you're going to do, because it's about you, right? It's not about A Tale of Two Cities. I don't even know if they still read that in school.
Yeah.
Comes to mind, but it's about you. And so
Right.
again, I always go back to don't think about, and a lot of times in school environment, you're like, well, what do I think they want to know? Or what do I think they are looking for, looking to communicate, right? Give yourself that opportunity to sit with those thoughts before you actually start to write it out. Because if you skip that step, you're working outside in instead of inside out.
Totally agree, 100%, which brings up, you brought something that I'm going to piggyback on, brainstorming. So based on all of your experience, based on working and reading all these essays, College Prep Roadmap highly recommends students to use summertime as a time to get started. So our current rising seniors, our juniors that just graduate or just finished their school year, not graduated, roughly, what would be a nice window that students should look at in terms of working on that brainstorming, exercise, a week or 2 weeks or 30 minutes a day, anything that they could tangible that they can use as a guide?
Yeah. So we always talk about the essay process actually doesn't have to be stressful. Keep in mind, like, essays don't have to be perfect. They don't have to be the most creative thing of all time. They just have to be clear and communicate who you are and how you think. So with that in mind, we typically suggest that the student uses either June or July to work on their main personal statement, and if you're in California, trying to get those UC personal insight questions done. For the personal statement, the Common App personal statement, we suggest picking a 2-week period of time. So pick 2 weeks sometime over the next 2 months and say, I know I'm going to be available to work about 6 to 8 hours total on the Common App essay. That's it. That's about all you need to write a really compelling Common App. It doesn't need to be something that you spend weeks and months sort of going over and over and over again. You need to sit down, pick the time, you'll write a draft, you'll get some feedback, you'll write another draft, you'll get some feedback. After about 3 or 4 drafts, you should be done. And that's where we think doing it in June and July is really good, because then when you get to August 1, when the supplements, the majority of the school-specific supplements are released, then you can start to focus on those individual supplements that many of the competitive schools will ask you to answer. And hopefully, you'll have a decent amount of content from brainstorming for the personal statement in the UCs that you may
Good point.
pull that in, repurpose, reuse for a lot of the supplements that you'll be working on.
That's a great point in terms of your notes, your brainstorming exercise, everything that you have written down, hang on to it. Which I want to just be clear to viewers, because we may have viewers that are their oldest will be a rising senior, and applications, Common App, insight questions for the UC system, they may not be familiar with that. So for the Common Application, that is a generic application that is accepted by, I think, close to 500 colleges. And you will know what type of application a college requires by going to the college website. So the Common App does require, as Patrick mentioned, one Common App essay, but they provide you 7 options, and then you can choose whichever you feel is most important. One is not favored over the other. It's whatever works for you. The UC system, the University of California Public System, they offer 8 options, and these are short, abbreviated insight questions, and 4 are required, 4 of your choice. Doesn't matter. So those are available now. I mean, I've in College Prep Roadmap, I'm posting those prompts for Common App are out there. Go check them out. Decide on which one's going to work for you. And the UC Insight questions, same thing. You brought up a great point. August 1, when August 1st hits, now our private schools, if they want additional essays, we call them supplemental. So that would be the Common App, 1 required, plus 1 or 2 more. And those supplemental essay topics, prompts, will be available. So if you, June and July, that's such a great time. I love to say that because you can be done. And when August 1st hits, you can now pivot and start looking at your supplemental, and your main essay is basically sitting on the shelf. Pretty much you're done. So I appreciate you reminding parents and viewers that August 1st deadline. Now, you said 3 or 4 times. Would that be a good number if a student is just starting or just listening? How many edits it takes to really have a nice, reviewed, edited essay to say, I'm good, I'm ready to submit? Is that a good number?
Yeah, I mean, that's generally what we recommend. So what I would say is you want to think about who's going to provide this feedback for you, right? And back to what we were talking about earlier, you want someone who's not going to come in and be too heavy-handed. You want someone who's going to be able to have an objective enough point of view about who you are. And what I mean by that is you want someone who's not going to be able to inherently fill in gaps that you may leave in your writing because they know you and they just are assuming, oh, that's what they mean, right? But an admissions reader won't know you. So you want someone who's objective, and you want someone you trust, right? Someone you can provide the type of feedback around content and structure that they know what colleges are looking to understand about you. And so if you can find that person, whoever that is, whether that's, a teacher, a counselor, if you want to work with us, we have a team of writing coaches, whoever that person is, if you find that person, you should be able to get about 3 or 4 rounds of feedback and basically be done with your essay. Could you get more than that? Yeah. Is there a point where it starts to become kind of too much, where you're getting into like 8, 10 reviews and you're sort of now in this like never ending cycle? Yeah, we see that a lot, and it's just not necessary. You've got plenty to do with your college applications. So if you can find time, really dedicate yourself to doing it well over 6 to 8 hours, 6 to 8 hours, not 68, 6 to 8 hours.
6 to 8.
Yeah, you should be done. And then you can focus your attention on the other parts of the application that are needed. The other thing I'd add here too is that, your grades are already sort of locked in, at least for last year. Who knows what is going on with the testing scenario and where you're at within the different versions of that. But essays is still something in your control. So you've still got time, even now, right, this month. If you start to brainstorm and you realize you started an activity and there's an opportunity to continue that through line by doing something else, there's still time to do that. And you could still include that in some of your stories. So that's, again, why, like, if you're going to be participating in something over the next 3 weeks that's meaningful, that contributes to other experiences that you've had within your, young life, then you might want to wait until July to write it so you have a larger group of experiences to pull from. But I would still try to get the Common App done within June and July. The other thing I just would mention around essays in general is when you think about your application, we like to talk about the goal of your application is to prove you're going to be successful in college and beyond, right, for your entire application. There's a lot of ways you can prove that. right? Colleges want to know you're going to do well in class, that you're going to contribute positively to their campus, you're going to be a positive member of their alumni and reflect well back on that institution. When you're approaching the application, you want to think of your applications holistically. So as we were talking about, the Common App is your personal statement. You'll also have an activities list or resume where you'll be able to go through and list all the things that you participate in. And then you'll have these supplemental essays in a lot of cases. You don't want to be repetitive across those categories, right? So for your personal statement, that shouldn't read like a list of your accomplishments, because you'll have an opportunity to do that in your activities list. For your supplement, that's where you're going to be oftentimes more school specific in a way that you're not going to be school specific for your overall Common App personal statement.
Thank you. That was on my mind. I just didn't get it out. I didn't write that down. It's so important to know that repetitive information. They're going to be like, okay, I'm bored. This is not interesting. And another thing I want to add is the Common App, as well as the Coalition application, does have a new section this coming school year about COVID-19. It's optional, but I always say if there's an optional section, fill it in. And there's got to be something you can write about it. It's an opportunity to add to it. So if COVID-19 has impacted you, and you want to make note of it, there will be a separate section, because I mean, thank goodness that these application companies did this. It really helped. It's a favor to the colleges not to dismiss or to dismiss the impact of COVID-19, because it's been hugely significant, but they don't want to read that as the main essay. Yeah. So yes.
I totally agree. And so we understand how profound this has been on all of you, and we empathize with that, because for those of us who are adults, it's hard enough. And so going through your academic education experience in this environment, like, I have no idea how you're all doing it. So good on you for navigating that. But at this point, they don't want to read a bunch of personal statements all about COVID. And that's why they created this additional info section. Now, that's not to say that it may not make sense to touch on something on COVID, but you kind of want to avoid essays that are all about what happened during COVID. Right. That's sort of the distinction that we would make, is that, talking about it as like a mention or a through line about something else you were doing already that you happen to continue to do during COVID, that's one thing. Talking about COVID created this environment, I went and did this, there's going to be the temptation for a lot of students to do that, and we would just generally advise against that.
Good point.
Yeah.
Yeah, very, very good point. No, this is great advice. Things to avoid, topics to avoid, and I'm assuming that you probably get this. I've heard over the many years from college admissions, certain things that they avoid. Can you share with our viewers certain topics that probably aren't good to write about in a college essay?
Yeah, and so this isn't meant to be like a blacklist. We take a philosophy around topics that it's called our only if philosophy, right? So okay. Athletics is a big one, right? A lot of students want to write about athletic, unless you're going to go pro, or unless athletics sort of was a spark that led you to do something else, right? Like you learned about racial inequality on one of your sports teams, and then you went and started a diversity initiative. Okay, fine. That more than fine. That's fantastic. And what I'm saying fine about is because it might have started with sports, but it's not another sports essay. They don't want to read about the bottom of the ninth inning and there were 2 outs and you sort of got the final out. They don't want to read about you overcoming your ACL tear. I know that's a really hard thing. Trust me, I get it, but they don't want to read about that. They also don't really want to read about service trips. The sort of overused essay is you went on a service trip, you realized life was different in another country than the life that you have here in the United States. And so here's what you've done. So anything that falls into what I would call like a common topic, you should think about, I can only write about this if it's going to be unique and different than anyone else who is writing about this particular topic. You have to be really careful writing about like anxiety, depression, things like that. Again, I understand how profound those things are on you. And I understand the desire to want to write about it, trust me. But admissions readers on the other end, it's really hard to execute an essay like that in a way that allows an admissions reader to really see who you're going to be on campus. And it's not to downplay the struggles you've gone through if that is relevant to you, but I would try to avoid those types of topics if you can.
No, that's sound advice, because the ACL tear, the ninth inning, actually extra innings, how about that? And then you're like, and it's so important to that student. And we're not saying it isn't, but we have to remember that we want the viewer to be entertained and interested and engaged. The minute they just start to get sleepy and not interested, you'll lose them. So the redundancy.
And we talk about this accept and reject mindset. So when you're writing an essay, you want to put someone in the accept mindset right away, because you want to put them in the accept mindset, help them start to picture you on their campus, and keep them in the accept mindset. If at any point during reading your essay they move into the reject mindset, it's actually really hard to get them back into that accept mindset. So you just want to think through that in terms of the content that you're using. And that's why we try to avoid some of these more common topics where they think they know where it's going because they've read hundreds of these before. I mean,
right.
The other thing to keep in mind is, so you want to think about who your audience is, right? The average admissions reader is probably in their 20s. They're reading hundreds of applications a day. They're not able to spend a tremendous amount of time with yours. So that's why it's really important to get them in that accept mindset and keep them there.
Oh, I love that. Keep them right in that moment. I remember visiting a college in Boston, and it was a counselor fly-in, fabulous fly-in, sat with admissions. It was dinner time. And I'll never forget this. And it was asking the same thing about essays. And the admissions officer said to us, I don't want to come off cold and, non-empathetic. However, there are 4 Ds that I try to tell students to avoid. So we're all perked up like, oh, what are those 4 Ds? And again, because it's kind of like your situation or what you had stated, the only if: disease, death, drugs and alcohol, divorce. So of course, all of us, counselors are like, oh, but those are so important and it affects the family. And it's like the admissions officer says, no, we understand that, but we need to know more than just that event. What was the outcome? We don't want to use it and tell the story over again that it affected you. It was sad, because we all know that. All of us have been affected by one of those categories. But like you mentioned, if that is a trigger point that leads to something else, by all means, mention it, but it can't be an entire essay. So the 4 Ds, and that trip was probably 10 years ago. And I was like,
I think a lot of that holds up too. And it's really hard. And I think all of us who think of ourselves as empathetic people, we get the desire to want to write about these things. We understand how profound they are on your life, and any of us that have experienced those things, we get it. But you have to think about what you're ultimately trying to do with an admissions essay. And I get back to proving you'll be successful in college and beyond, right? And it doesn't, with your essays, you're also fighting the desire to tell your life story. You're not going to be able to. And frankly, like a lot of the stuff that happened before sophomore year of high school is irrelevant, at least in the minds of an admissions reader. They don't want you to spend a ton of time talking about 3rd grade anecdotes or 5th grade anecdotes, because you've grown so much as a person, hopefully since then, that it's really more about what you've done over the last 2 or 3 years in terms of communicating. That's not to say they don't care about your history as a person. It's just when you think about the application specifically, that's what is most relevant to communicate, and not your entire life story. It doesn't need to be a chronological, I was born on this day and here's everything that's happened until the moment I'm writing this essay.
right.
Like a snippet of time that gives a really good characterization of who you are, versus trying to tell everything profound that's ever happened to you.
And that is a perfect point, excellent point. When we advise our students, we're advising them in high school. So when you're filling out an application and you're putting activities or volunteer, it's high school, not middle school, or even elementary school. Now, if you started there, If you started something in 6th grade and you continue to do it and you're now going to be a rising senior, again, you can mention, I tapped into this volunteer opportunity and I'm still doing it. Oh my goodness. Showing the history, the commitment, the depth of, the depth and breadth of that volunteer service is amazing. But yeah, that's so true. It's like, keep it tight, keep it more current. I think that would be helpful. You brought something else up and I just want to like kind of summarize, is that as a support team would be an essay writing coach, an independent college counselor, a high school counselor, teachers, administrators, high school counselors. As a team, our job is to help serve the student and position that student in the best position possible. So as you had mentioned, there's times where we may say something where the parents are not going to agree, and they're going to go, that ACL surgery honestly was the worst situation, worst scenario for my son or daughter. And we have to, unfortunately, be on the front line going, we get it, but our jobs are to protect your student and position your student the best possible way so they are going to be accepted. So I'm glad you brought that up, because sometimes our job's having that hard conversation when the parents disagree, but we're only looking out unbiasedly for our students. We want to support our students. And if what they're writing about needs some extra feedback and it's changing it up a little bit, it's like, that's not a good topic. I hope parents and students understand we are coming from, from within. It's heart-centered. It's to help the student be the best applicant out there, in the application cycle. So I appreciate you bringing that up. Closing. I mean, this was such good information. I love how, June and July would be an ideal time to just get started. 6 to 8 hours. I mean, just hearing that, students should be like, oh my gosh, I could do this. I mean, they spend probably 20 to 30 hours on video games, which
you can get it done in a week if you're really committed to it.
Right.
And then you don't have to think about it when you get into your senior year, knowing, you got enough going on right now in the world. So it'd be a good time to knock it out over the next 6 to 8 weeks.
Yes. Are there any last minute tips or a comment that you would like to present and share with our parents that we didn't cover and that I haven't asked?
I would say 2 things.
Okay.
Yeah, 2 quick things come to mind. There really is no need to stress about essays. They don't need to be perfect. They don't need to use like a crazy metaphor or like what we call like a gimmicky thing. Like, they want to be authentic, clear about who you are. That's number 1. So that's part of the reason I'd say don't stress. Number 2 would be, when you get into the school specific supplements, really make sure you're reading the question and answering the question. And it's okay to answer your supplements where there's limited word count to be direct and use specificity, right? Because those 2 things are going to help you really communicate more of what the college is looking to understand about you. So we didn't have a ton of time to talk through supplements today. You'll get into those in like the August time period, but those are 2 just general pieces of advice I'd give. Sort of, well, 3, I guess, but make sure you read the question and answer the question. Think about the question behind the question. Like, why are they asking this type of question? And then be direct and use specific examples and anecdotes.
That's perfect. And that supplemental essay that's asking why our school, it's typical, like you said, they want to know, why are you applying to this particular school? Make sure you do the research.
Yep.
Not because great tailgate, scene before the football game. It's like, oh goodness, we want to go deeper. We want to go, what college are you applying to? What specific courses did you see on the website that actually are kind of interesting? And show the depth and breadth and the investment that you've made in that particular school, because that's really going to make it or break it. They'll know if you just skim the website for like 30 seconds versus really checking it out for a couple hours and taking notes and being mindful and intentional. So that is perfect. This was amazing. I think as a viewer, I would have so many great takeaways. And it's honestly, you put me at ease if I was a new listener, and that I don't need to worry about it. I don't need to stress out about my essay. And I only need to like compartmentalize so many hours and focus on it. And really using August 1 as a time where you're done with your main essay, and that you can then start looking at the supplemental if there are, and if there aren't, then you can start working on filling out an application, which isn't as difficult as the essay, and you can have that nice transition from summer to senior year. So thank you so much from New York, helping us navigate our students and our parents through this journey. And this is our last year for them, for our essay writers. This is the last year before they will be applying to college. And I appreciate everything that you have. I will be providing information, contact information in the comment section, because Prompt is a reliable, solid essay review and feedback company that I highly recommend. And Patrick, I hope that you can add, you'll have access to that. You can add the specifics in terms of it is online, it's virtual, which I absolutely love. Anyone from across the country, around the world actually, could get the support that they need in the luxury of their own home. It's ideal. So together, collectively, we will add comments to the comment section. So our viewers will have that information, your contact information, your website information, everything that we have. So I'd like to thank you again. This is Thursday, the 11th of June, the 11th week of College Prep Roadmap. We are here to help you, parents and students, have a great high school experience and get yourself ready and prepared for the college application process. And on that note, I'm going to sign off. Thank you again, Patrick. Have a fabulous week, a safe week, and we will talk soon.
Thank you.
Okay, take care. Bye-bye.